Wheel spin. Yay! Okay, spinning wheel has ended. We are officially live. Hello, everyone. This is Constance from Mysterious Galaxy. Thank you very much for joining us this evening. I am very excited because middle grade is something that is very near and dear to our hearts at Mysterious Galaxy. It's such a special genre, and we are having a special evening for the special genre full of magic and sci-fi. You have space, you have dragons, you have the whole gambit of things that we love. And we have a great panel, and I am going to go through, give our panel, I'm going to do it really quick though so that they can actually say more about themselves, because you're here to listen to them talk, not me. But if you guys will just raise your hand when I say your name, we have Michael Buckley, who is, there we go. And then we have, I still want to say Princess Leia, it's so bad, but we have Leah Cypess right next to me. Then we have Scott Reintgen right down below. And then we have Jennifer L. Holm, who is over that side, and she is going to be our fearless leader once I leave the screen. But I just want to say we have a great panel in store for you guys. Before I kick it off, just to let you all know the house rules as we like to go over them, we have to the right-hand side our general chat section. Thank you so much for all of the love that you guys always share down there. Hello, Tiffany and Henry. Shout out. And also, if you guys have any questions, make sure you ask. As you all know, the best part about an event is that the authors are at your mercy, and you get to pick their brains and ask all of the questions you wonder that goes on in the mysterious mind of the author. And then also, too, of course, if you would like to support Mysterious Galaxy as well as these authors and their awesome new books, I would highly recommend you hit that "It's time for the pointing, the purchase book" button down below, and you can actually get signed and personalized book plates from all of these authors. On that note, I'm going to pass it off to you, Jenny, and I will see you guys all at the end of the event.
Hey, hi everybody. Thank you. We love the Mysterious Galaxy. I'm actually, I live in SoCal now, and it's one of the most amazing stores here. So we've got a really cool crew of authors. I feel like I'm being blinded by the sun behind me. Okay.
You look like you're casting a magical spell. Actually.
It's not on purpose. I've never had this happen, you guys.
I love it. I love it.
Harry Potter. I needed like a Harry Potter spell to get the. Oh, it worked. Look at that.
Casting your portrait.
Yeah.
Is it your portrait? Yeah.
I'll hold up my hand. No. So I think what we should first do is have everybody give a little elevator pitch about their book. You know, there's sort of a famous story that Steven Spielberg wanted people to pitch them their story idea in 25 words or less in an elevator. But I think we can use more words than that. So I'll start. So my new book, The Lion of Mars, it's a book that takes place in 2091, and it's about a boy named Bell who is living in the American settlement on Mars. The other countries on Mars have no contact with the American settlement. And then a tragedy strikes, and it's up to Belle and the other children of the settlement to figure out how to survive. Dun, dun, dun. So, all right, next.
Very.
Just jump in.
All right, I guess I'll go. My name is Leah Cypess. My book is Thornwood, and it is the story of Sleeping Beauty's little sister, who never made it into any of the fairy tales because her gorgeous, cursed older sister was always the center of attention. But when she wakes up after the 100 years have passed, she discovers that things are going wrong. The Thornwood around the castle has not disappeared. She doesn't think the prince is exactly who he says he is, but nobody will listen to her because she is just the younger sister.
Cool.
Fight it out. Fight it out.
All right. I'll run with it. We'll just point at each other for the rest of the night otherwise. So my name is Scott Reintgen. My series for this age is the Tailspinner series. So Saving Fable and the recently released Escaping Ordinary. Saving Fable follows Indira, who is a character in training. So she just wants to be a character in a book. Who wouldn't? And so she goes to school for that. She goes to Protagonist Preparatory, where she's so excited she's going to be a hero in a book. Unfortunately, she fails her auditions. She's told she cannot be a hero. She can only ever be a side character. And we have to follow her through kind of her first year of school. She tries to figure out, what do you do after you fail like that? And how do you come back from it? And how do you go beyond people's expectations? Book 2 kind of follows her as she gets pulled into one big video game. And so it's kind of an ongoing series with these two already out in the world.
Fun. Okay. My name is Michael Buckley, and my latest book is part of a series. The first one was called Finn in the Intergalactic Lunchbox, and the second one is Finn in the Time-Traveling Pajamas. And it's about a boy named Finn and his friends Julep and Lincoln. And one day Finn is visited by an old man who happens to be a future version of himself, and he gives him a pair of pajamas that just happen to be a time machine. And he tells him that in the future there is a bad guy who is trying to destroy the universe, and that old man Finn has never been able to beat him. So he's sending a younger version in to be the spoiler. And unfortunately, before they can even get started, the pajamas get a tear in them, and makes it impossible for him to figure out where he's going and where he's going to land. And it's part of a series. And the third one comes out. It's called Finn and the Subatomic Slip and Slide, which will be out next year.
All right, those are great titles. Very well done. Very well done. All right, so, okay, my first question for all of my authors is, what was your inspiration? I think that's something that everybody in the audience is going to want to know, because they'll read the book eventually, but now they're going to get a little inside scoop into what really got you started down this road.
Well, I can start. The first book is a little different than the second one, and I can't really explain it without saying a little bit about it. The lunchbox is actually a wormhole to other galaxies. And because when I was a kid, my mom would make me lunch in a lunchbox, and I'd go to school in it every day. And it was always a surprise because my mom was not really a very good cook. So sometimes the surprise
I feel for her.
Yeah, lunch was a good thing, and sometimes it was a terrible thing, which where it got the idea. And then the sequel with the pajamas, I'd have to say, that the biggest inspiration was the show that was on TV when I was a little kid called The Greatest American Hero. About a guy. Yeah, it's one of my favorite shows.
I used to listen to it on the radio. Like, I could get the band signal like to my radio clock, and I actually taped it. Yeah, that's how old I am.
Yeah, in that show, there was a school teacher who was in the desert some night, and he was visited by an alien race who gave him a suit, like a superhero suit. But unfortunately, on the way back to town, he lost the instruction book. And I always loved this idea. I think it's like the very perfect premise for a story. You have all the power in the world and yet have no idea how to use it. And it was fun watching him learn how to fly and learn that he was bulletproof and how to turn invisible and all these other really fun superpowers. So I think that really was a big inspiration for this.
Love it. Bring back the 70s, man. Bring it back.
Oh, yeah.
Now you just got me thinking about like what was in my lunchbox in middle school. I'm like kind of hungry now, honestly. So inspiration, Saving Fable. There's a lot of different things that go into it, but really, the primary thing was just wanting to kind of play with what would a school really look like for characters. You know, we know what it means like to go through our school and prepare for our world, but if you're going to be a character in a story, what would you have to do? And I really wanted to play with a lot of the world that we love and know and all the characters we love and know. And so it was really fun to bring in, Alice from Alice in Wonderland, who teaches like this escape room class where they get put in these weird scenarios and have to find their way out. The Love by Page 12 class is by Professor Darcy, who teaches in the rainy courtyard and, teaches them how to romantically look away and appear disinterested. So it's a lot of really fun stuff and just wanting to kind of show off like what would it be like if you stepped out of the normal school world and into this world? How would you prepare to be a character? How different would it be? But also how similar? Like every kid that we know is going to go through failure, like Indira goes through. And so what are those things that tie us together, even though we're in a completely different world, in a completely different space?
I love the covers, the jacket. They're beautiful. I think they're so good. Yeah. I have a very cranky 13-year-old girl who doesn't like anything, and she like saw those books and she picked them up. So
yeah, I should shout out Mikey Plinsky, who's the author, a German author who like these. I mean, that's a part of why we're gonna talk about that later, like why we love to write middle grade. But like these are the kind of like adventurous, like beautiful covers that like you're like, ooh, that's why middle grade's so fun, right?
Yeah, I love your second cover especially, and it just inspired me. I'm like, I must put a dragon on one of my books so that I could have a dragon on a cover. Now, I love my cover as well. But that's
been my goal since I was like 5. Just get a dragon on there somehow, you know,
yeah.
any way possible. Let's just make sure we sneak one in.
Yeah, I actually had one of my young adult books where I put a dragon in, but the dragon didn't really do anything. It was just there. And my editor was like, you put a dragon in the book and then it didn't do anything. Don't you think that's going to confuse people? I was like, all right, fine.
you just wanted a pet like in Pern, you know?
Yes.
Yeah. I don't know. There's room in the world for lazy dragons, I think. There's a real soft spot in audiences for lazy dragons.
If you can't crowbar a dragon into a story, what can you crowbar in? Really?
Exactly.
Exactly. Like a big fat sleepy kitten dragon, you know?
Yeah.
Audiences and their expectations. Like you can't put a dragon on the mantelpiece, you know, and then just have it sit there for the whole story.
You could have just said, well, it'll make sense in the later books.
Right. It wouldn't though.
Well. All right. Well, let's hear about tell us more.
All right. So, right, my inspiration for my book that I'm supposed to be talking about had nothing to do with dragons. But I've always been inspired by fairy tales. Just like Scott, I've always loved fairy tale retellings, like anything that has to do with fairy tales. As a kid, I just like pick it up immediately. And so this book actually first came into existence just as an idea of, you know, telling Sleeping Beauty's story about what happened after she woke up. And I wrote it in college, and it was just told from Sleeping Beauty's point of view. And, you know, I wrote the whole book, but in the end, it wasn't good, even less so than most of the manuscripts I wrote in college. So I put it aside. And then when I started thinking about middle grade, basically the younger sister just popped into my mind, like fully formed, like she just started talking. I remember I just sat down, I wrote the prologue and first chapter in her voice. And, you know, basically, you know, this invented person who I don't even feel like I invented because she just like sprang into life, inspired me to tell this version of the story, which is about Sleeping Beauty's little sister.
So it's a book of sibling love, sort of.
Sibling
Maybe?
Relationships,
nice.
Which include love, among other things.
Sorry, I work with my brother on a lot of books, so I always get asked the sibling question. So, yeah. And so in my book, Light of Mars, it was actually inspired by my very first book. My first book was historical fiction. It was called Our Only May Amelia, and it was about a Finnish-American family. My family was from Finland, and they grew up. They came to this country in the 1800s, and they had a small family farm. And so May Amelia was really about the hardship of living on that farm at the turn of the century. And so I kind of wondered what it would be like to settle Mars in a similar situation, not in like this big, shiny, techie way with like glass bubbles, but what would the reality be of settling Mars with just a small group of people? All right.
That's cool.
Let's see. All right. Okay. So I think what's great with all of these books is world building. So can you talk a little bit about how you created your world? That moment of awkward silence.
Yeah. I would say like a lot of my books are set in the Hudson Valley, which is upstate New York. So this one is set in a town called Cold Spring, where I used to own a home. And it's I always like to try to start out in a very normal situation, something easily recognizable, and then turn it upside down. And so the world building is really just them traveling forward into time. But what happened and backward is that they don't travel anywhere in space. So they go into the future, and then 500 years they're still standing in their backyard. It's just the world is completely changed. And I had so much fun with that. And I was like, I really wanted to stick to that rule that, I'm not going to put them, it'd be really fun to have had them like running from dinosaurs, but there really weren't any dinosaurs in the Hudson Valley. I mean, like at least not on land. And so, that was some of the challenges of it as well. Is like there's all these great things that, that he meets Cleopatra and all this stuff, but I wanted to keep it like stuck in one place.
Did you have like with the whole, I feel like the whole like leaping forward in time and going back in time is like when you get a bunch of authors together, they always say like that's the hardest thing to solve, like the Back to the Future dilemma. Like how do you account for all of that?
Well, I think the problem for me wasn't so much the back and forth stuff. It was trying to do something unique with time travel. And that's where you get into real trouble because it's so much easier just to do the Back to the Future rules. Because, that's in fact, that is my favorite movie of all time. So I know it back and forth. I mean, it's the rules of how time travel work are so simple and easy to understand that a little kid can understand them. But I also felt like, a lot of kids have probably seen that movie, and I wanted to do something different. So I did tell my editor, like about halfway through it, like never let me write another time travel story.
Exactly,
again.
That's what I was saying.
Yeah, it is a nightmare of trying to simplify it. But yeah, it was still fun. But I don't know. I probably won't do it again.
One and done. All right.
I did not attempt time travel for that reason.
See, I mean,
hard. It's hard.
Really hard.
One of my favorites was it's an adult series by Wesley Chu called Time Salvager, where he like his play with it was like going to the end of timelines that were closing out and stealing resources and then traveling back. Like at least it was about to, like a ship was about to explode anyways, kind of thing. But that's
a little like Time Bandit.
Yeah, it's kind of
Time Bandits.
It just all explodes my brain. So I stick with things I get to make up myself and not worry about, and I make all the rules, right? For Saving Babel, it really is like a lot of building. Yeah, my favorite thing is our world or something familiar with just that little bit of a twist that takes it into the unknown, that step beyond that you get to offer the reader. And so for Saving Babel, it was just bring all the things that we know about books, right, to life. Because this is the world of imagination. It's where all things bookish kind of collect. And so the people who live in the city of fable are bookmarks, a lot of them. And so if you've ever used a bookmark, you are a part of this issue where if you put a bookmark in the book, they're in the book. They're experiencing it. They're with the characters. But the second you pull them out, they vanish, they appear in fable, and they talk about what scene they're in with each other, and they're really bad at giving advice because they skip so many chapters. Don't trust them, right?
That is so clever. I'm sorry. That is so clever.
And it's a great way to explore your own pain, right? So I, as a writer, we all have these similar experiences. So down in the sepulcher of the school, the most haunting thing is not, bodies or whatever, it's manuscripts that didn't get published, right?
This is a love letter to authors.
It's actually, so unfinished books. So you walk down that hallway and it's just book after book that never got finished by someone. And so it's kind of like just bringing those things to life, things we know, things we've experienced. We know what it's like to start a story and not finish it. We know what it's like to hold a bookmark in our hands, but this world twists it just a little bit. And that's kind of where I started with all my world building for this particular story.
So clever.
Yeah. It seems very redundant to say, but like, it was obvious to me that an author wrote that book, not just for more than the obvious.
I put myself in the book too. That's one of the little cheats you get to do when you're writing something so meta. Is like you just throw a scene where she sees me in the book and she's like, "Is that my author?" And I'm like, "Yeah, technically it is. It's all weird that I'm doing this."
Cool. So I feel like you're always going last because you're the one asking the questions.
Well, no, you go though. You go. I'm like the host at the dinner party. I'm gonna get up and do the dishes, or make my kids do the dishes eventually, or hear them whine about making me. Yeah.
Right. So Thornwood is set almost entirely like inside a castle because they're trapped in the castle. It's surrounded by a wood of thorns, and part of the problem is that they can't get out. Luckily for me, many years ago when I was younger and had more free time, I wrote a book that was set in a castle, and I went to England and spent 4 days basically just like going from castle to castle and taking copious notes and just like writing descriptions. I filled an entire notebook, and I still have that notebook, which I pull out and use whenever I write something that is set in a castle. Eventually I'll have to go look at some more castles, but not for this book. For this book, that notebook was sufficient.
And then did you like fall down the rabbit hole of like furnishings and what they're eating and all of that madness?
Right. So I did a little bit. Since I'm not writing something that's strictly historical, I didn't feel the need to be like, wait, what year were forks invented, or whatever. So as long as it as long as it felt right to me, and as long as I'd seen something like that and I could describe it, I was fine putting it in. So I did do research, but not the kind of intense someone is going to write to me and tell me I got this wrong kind of research you do when you're writing something historical.
Yeah.
Right.
So go, Michael.
I just wanted to say that like this is one of the things when I talk to kids at schools and stuff. This is one of the things that I tell them, like, this job is really just unbelievably interesting and exciting. And like what other job would you have where you get to go hang out in castles for a few days?
I need to write a book with a castle. Jeez.
It's like literally, like, our job is in many ways just to tell the truth about things, and you can't know the truth unless you've had the experience. And so walking through those castles was like very valuable to storytelling. And I always tell kids, like, they think that writers are just we just sit in these little rooms and type all day. But the truth is we're kind of all out having adventures. Like, yeah. I mean, Jenny, you can tell us how you went to Mars, of course.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, I didn't. And the question I'm constantly asked now is like, would you like to go to Mars? To which I say no, because I get terribly motion sick. And so that is like one of the worst things with plane travel, like in space. So no, I will never fly to Mars. My husband's very sad about that. So I actually did.
He wants to go.
He wants to go. He actually applied to be an astronaut. No joke. And he was rejected. But I do have a little like astronaut connection, like familial connection. So my father was a naval pilot during the Korean War. And the aircraft carrier that he flew off of was one of the carriers that like caught the astronauts during the splashdown back in the day. Mm-hmm. So that was kind of, he wasn't there, but I could say the ship was. So, So I did fall into the rabbit hole of trying to make it as grounded in realistic science as possible. I harassed a lot of very nice NASA scientists and people at SpaceX to make sure everything was as possibly correct, but still like have a little bit of, fantasy to it. I think what's hard about, my past is mostly writing about historical fiction, and there's like a agreed upon things that happened, like when the fork was invented. And what's interesting about writing science fiction is everybody is just still debating what the future is going to be. Like one little new change, one invention can change everything. So there's not perfect agreement about what's going to happen.
It's all right. It's the different.
My daughter just.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
All right. I was going to say my daughter just like handed me a book that was set in like, I don't know, 2021 or something. And she was like, it doesn't have the pandemic in it.
It got it wrong.
Yeah.
I'd rather we were living that book, quite frankly.
Yeah. I was going to say that for the Mars thing, I'm working on something that has Mars as a feature, and my first thought was to add a magic that lets me get around all of those problems. So it's a completely different approach to world building. Like I want to include some of the things we know, but I want to basically take it and completely flip it in a different direction, mainly just to get myself out of jail and do really fun things. So
it's kind of like being in jail, like trying to deal with all the science. All right,
we're going to do interesting. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, you go.
I was going to say, it's kind of interesting, like all these, because I'm seeing a lot of things about Mars out there, and I think it must be very similar to the groundswell of fascination people had when we went to the moon. Just because the possibility of us actually going to Mars is very likely in a not too distant future, and I think it's great that there's all this fiction coming out about it. That's what we did with the moon, and I think it's fun to see kind of history repeating itself with that.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're in the second biggest space race of all time. We are living it in real time. It's so exciting.
Right.
I mean, I personally think we'll be on the moon in the next 5 years, and that's going to be our training ground. And the people that have been trained on the moon will then be the first settlers on Mars. So. Yeah. All right. So one more question, because we have quite a lot of questions in our comments, which is, what do you like? Why do you guys like writing for this age group? Because, we're not at the big kid lunch table. We're not like in the sexy YA. We're not in the picture book. We're with the kids who are like, when they're in 4th grade, they're super sweet, or they're 13, like my daughter, they're a little cranky, and puberty is everywhere. So like, what appeals to you about writing for this group?
I'll go first. Never mind, I won't.
Okay. No, you go ahead.
I was gonna say, because my answer is kind of cliche, and that way I'll get to be the one who says it first in case anyone else has it. But I really kind of got interested in starting to write middle grade when my kids hit that age. And I started like reading the books that they were reading, some of which were books that I had read when I was younger, and I just remembered how much I loved those books. I basically like forced them all to read all of Diana Wynne Jones. And I also forced all their friends to read Diana Wynne Jones. I was very popular. And then I read their books. I just started to love that voice. And then once I started trying to write middle grade on my own, I could actually, read it to them while I was writing the books. And that was just, amazing to have like that immediate feedback and kind of see like in real time, what's boring, what they like, what's interesting. So, and so that's what got me started.
And so did you feed them your manuscripts and get comments back from the peanut gallery in your house, or?
I did.
Oh, very brave, very brave. And were they honest or mom?
Oh no, they're very honest. My favorite comment is when I read a chapter of one of my books to my daughter, and I said to her, "Do you want me to read the next chapter?" And she said, "Yes. Are things going to happen in the next chapter?"
Or to the heart.
Like, I guess I better revise this chapter.
Young readers are like brutal. I had a 9th grade student reading my first book that would end up getting published, and he came to me one day. He's like, "Yeah, chapter 3 doesn't work for me." I was like, all of it? All of it. And I was like, cool. No, we'll get rid of it. You're right. That doesn't belong there.
That's a terrible child.
Unpaid editors.
I think for me, it's that most of the books, I mean, not entirely, but most of the books that I admire are written by middle grade authors. I mean, the books that meant the most to me throughout my entire life are like The Mouse and the Motorcycle, and A Wrinkle in Time, and all these things that we had introduced to us, and you see them still on shelves. And like it's like those books, like Roald Dahl, just all that stuff, just such inspiring, beautiful, creative, and original. And so why wouldn't I want to try and be part of that club, really? And to be honest, I've written YA and I've written picture books, and I just think the people who write middle grade are cooler. I mean,
we're fun.
Honestly,
we sit at the kids' table.
They're a lot more interesting. I mean, like whenever there's a big publishing party, the middle grade tables are always the one where everything fun is happening. I will completely say that's not a. I'm not trying to kiss anybody's behind here. That's absolutely the truth. Like, I think we're a lot more fun than the other writers. Absolutely.
Oh, there's always kids. That's why there's always a new second grader. There's always a new third grader. You know.
Yeah.
Plot twist. I'm a YA author. No, I'm just kidding. I am. Most of my books are YA.
Really? So is this your first middle grade series?
It is, yes, very much
Right.
so. So I had the Nixia trilogy before that, and then I had Ash Lords. But both of it's so interesting to hear, because I found middle grade to be such a breath of fresh air when I started writing it. Especially when I first started out, I was reading Game of Thrones for the first time, and I was writing this dark YA fantasy that never got picked up. And I remember trying a middle grade hat on for the first time and just being like, oh, this is breathlessly fun. Like, so much adventure. The voice is so lovely. And I think too that concept that Michael mentioned for me is the sticking point. Is it's such an honor. We are the canonical starting point for kids. Like, we're the jumping off point where they first meet that trope for the first time, and they see this on the page. We get to be the person who introduces them to these types of storytelling habits and such. And so I think there's just this honor to being a part of that. But for me, so I was a hesitant reader, and I mean hesitant, like wasn't a reader till probably 8th grade, because I just didn't feel like there were books for me. And so to get a chance at being that first book that pulls a reader in and doesn't let them go, and then opens up 20 more doors for them that they get to knock on and see what's next. I think there's something really wonderful about that. I mean, I'll always treasure that idea, and seeing a kid kind of crack open my book for the first time, knowing it might just be the one they fall head over heels for. I think that's a really cool thing.
I love that.
Like, just to kick in here, just one thing adding to that is that, I think that I mean, I don't want to besmirch any other type of author, but I think what middle grade, I think there's a lot of weight to what we do, and that there's a lot of value. What you're saying is that, to be the author that a kid opens a book to and becomes a reader. It's like we're the gatekeeper there between what kids are going to grow up to continue to be readers, and what kids are going to give up. And I don't think any other, at least not in Kid Lit, I don't think anybody else has that kind of responsibility like we do. And I think because we take that responsibility so seriously, a lot of the things we do, I think, are really adventurous and groundbreaking in ways that continue to inspire. I don't know. You can sit at our table.
I think young adult is sometimes more about enticing readers back, right? Because there is that weird gap sometimes where we get that first, like 4th to 6th grade, where it's like, oh, all these cool books, and then sometimes we fade away a little bit. I faded away for sure, because I was like, reading's not cool anymore. Like, I got all this other stuff to do. And then all of a sudden, there were books that brought me back to the table in YA. And so I think, there's I think duties on both sides, though, where it's like we get the chance to entertain, and we got to take that seriously and bring our best to the table every time we sit down and write a book, which is cool.
Oh.
Yeah.
All right. Speaking of our duties to our readers, we have reader questions. So the first question is, can you offer writer tips about how to achieve distinct character voices? That is a good question, I think, and that can be pretty tricky too. Who wants to go for it? Jump in, someone. Do it.
All right. So, I mean, I think I don't really have any tips. I think that the way you get a good character voice is just by really understanding that character. And what I sometimes do is I'll actually write a scene. If I'm having trouble with a character voice, I'll write a scene from the point of view of the character. I usually have this problem with side characters, because if you don't have the main character's voice, you just can't even start writing the story. So I'll write a scene from the point of view of that side character, and even though I'll never actually use that thing that I wrote, in the book. It just kind of helps me think about what the side character is thinking and what the side character is feeling. That sort of gives me their voice. Or sometimes I'll write like a prologue for the side character, to show where they're coming from, what happened to them before the story started.
That's interesting. I don't think I've ever done that. It's kind of cool. It's like almost like a writing exercise to just get in the head.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, I like that. Like any stream of conscious type thing, just getting words down. And also the thing that makes us weird, talk to them, right? Like you would any other person. I think getting some of that dialogue going between you and your character that's in your head, and maybe don't do it in a coffee shop, but maybe, why not? But it's one of those things where I think that is where I start to hear the voice of my characters, kind of testing them a little bit and seeing what they're made of. And usually it starts to kind of feel a little bit more solidified the longer I kind of sit down and chat with them.
Yeah. One of the things that I do is I cast the book. So if the characters are not really popping with me, I used to do this with magazines, but mainly I do it with the internet now, is I'll make a file and I'll cast a famous person to be that character. And sometimes it's several different people. And what happens is they start to help me find the voice. Because if I'm gonna put a kid in, like if I need a really like sweet, funny teacher, I might think, okay, like Tom Hanks. I know enough about Tom Hanks's movies, and that I can find that inner core thing there. I can borrow a little bit from him until my character becomes who he is. But I usually use like famous people as the starters.
That's very clever. I think I usually find, for me, I usually have the voice first. That usually comes generally pretty easily to me. But I think where I really, it helps in revision is I really punch it up. And so a character might start sweet, but I make them much sweeter. I tend to exaggerate a lot of the personality quirks, so you can see it on the pages. I feel like when you soft pedal all of if it's more nuanced, it reads more of an adult book to me. And if it's a bit more extreme, you just really latch onto those characters. So I do feel like I tend to exaggerate, like, quirks of the characters a lot more to make them memorable. All right, so here, let me go to the other question, which is, this is interesting. How familiar are your audiences with the science fiction and fantasy concepts that we take for granted in older readers? Which is like, we were kind of talking about that with Back to the Future.
I think you can't really take it for granted at all. I just have to assume that most of the things I love, the child does not know anything about. And then that's just how it is. So, there's a benefit to that, though, by getting a chance to reintroduce them to some things that they have never heard of. But yeah, you can't just go in assuming they know anything about your favorite movie or your favorite TV show or some record that you think is like the most important record ever made.
Or the Breakfast Club.
Yeah, they don't know that. Like they don't know what 16 Candles is, or The Last Starfighter, or Battlestar Galactica. They don't know what the A-Team was. The Dukes of Hazzard. These are things they don't have any reference about. Fantasy Island is not a thing. So you get a chance to kind of reintroduce this stuff.
Yeah, so I actually just went through that with an editor on a separate book about, there was kind of a allusion to the Body Snatchers movie, and I said, I don't think we can use that because they are not going to have any idea about, that was dated when I was a kid. There is no way they're going to know what that's about. So
yeah.
Right. Well, and what's probably the most extreme example, during revision, I actually had to put in a brief summary of the Fairy Tale of Sleeping Beauty, because
I mean,
they're like, I guess Disney hasn't made a movie about it. You can't assume that kids are going to know what it is.
Yeah.
That is
When wrote my first books were called The Sisters Grimm, and they were like fairy tale characters living in the modern world. And the French translation, I had to change it a little bit because they didn't know what The Wizard of Oz was.
Oh,
Like, it
really?
wasn't
Wow.
I guess it wasn't like a cultural icon like it is here.
No,
That's
it's
funny.
very American. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, I think it's fascinating to me. Like, a lot of middle school kids are super deep dive, right? They know a lot about these 2 or 3 topics, and they have
Random things. Yeah.
everything. They like they could walk you through like Minecraft or Fortnite or whatever it is, and they could go deep into that. But I do like the idea, less from a content or like a reference perspective. I treat all of my stuff as gateway sci-fi, gateway fantasy. It's meant to be that invitation for the reader who's never touched the genre, and they feel like, oh, I didn't like sci-fi, but this Nixia series, I could kind of get along with this. And so I want it to be so inviting, but it still has to, at the back end, reward those readers who do love the deep dive and who do love the sci-fi. So it's kind of balancing it, but I want to invite in first before we get to those kind of thicker moments where they're more in the weeds of it.
Interesting. All right. And here's a really deep craft question. Related to the previous question, how trope reliant is appropriate for a fantasy world? For example, it's fine to use goblins and elves because some of the world building is done for you. Or do you create your own fantasy races to distinguish your work from, all other novels? Interesting. Are goblins and elves universal? What about orcs, giants,
Yeah.
gray aliens?
I don't like to be roped into things. If I can create something on my own, I will. But I also don't feel that I am obligated to follow what J.R.R. Tolkien wrote. I'm like, I feel like, well, okay, he sort of defines so much of that fantasy stuff, and I'm not sure that he should be the end all be all for it. So I've made changes to things like in the Sisters Grimm, there's a character named Puck, who is a fairy, but he's tall and he's got pointy ears, and he looks more like a little boy than any kind of magical creature. And so yeah, I think you gotta I think it's important that you don't completely reimagine something so people don't recognize it, but I also don't feel like you have to follow anybody's rules, especially people who aren't even alive anymore.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah, I think I actually love tropes. I love like playing with tropes and changing them around. Back, I remember once reading this rant, I don't remember who wrote it anymore, about science fiction writers who invent a creature with 4 legs that carries you from place to place. But instead of calling it a horse, they call it something else, just to be like authentic to their world. And this particular person who was ranting about it was really annoyed by that. And I think in a way I agree with that. Like, if I'm going to have magical creatures with wings, they're going to be called fairies. At the same time, I don't have to, unicorns, elves, all these things, they don't have to be, however they've been defined to be by, I guess none of them are actually defined. There are so many different variations of them floating around. But I like taking that basic trope and then, playing with it and making it into whatever I want it to be for my story.
Yeah, I like that. Just that concept of, we all know there's nothing new under the sun. We're following in the footsteps of a lot of stories that have come before us, but it's what makes it new is your voice and your twist on it, right? So my favorite, so Ash Lords is one of the books that I am most proud of. I don't like to pretend that I have a favorite, but don't tell me other books. This one's my favorite. And so for Ash Lords, it's a horse race, right? Like, we've seen horse races. Horse races have been in books. And the fun thing is that it's a phoenix horse race. So these horses live and die all in one day. They ride all night. They burst into flames when the sun sets. They die. They cool into ashes. And at sunrise, they come back to life. And you can mix different powders into those ashes to create a different type of horse for the next leg of the race. And so I think it's just all about expectation and what we know about, okay, here's all the horse racing stories. Here's what I know about them. How do I take that and just subtly change it so that it feels brand new, even though it's totally familiar to the reader?
Yeah.
Right.
Well,
I do a little bit of that in. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Jen.
No, you go. You go.
I was going to say real quick in this one, like just to go along that theme, there are unicorns in this book. And but what I did with them, I made them bloodthirsty.
Ooh, mean unicorns?
So they're part of a herd called the Brotherhood of the Bloody Hoof, and because really a unicorn is just a horse with a dagger on its head, and and it was really fun to kind of reimagine what that would be like.
Game of Thrones needs one of those bad boys for sure. Well, this has been an amazing panel. You guys are all like incredible authors, and I know that all of our readers are going to be so excited to pick up your books. Speaking of which, look at the purchase button on the bottom. Support your local fabulous indie bookstore, Mysterious Galaxy. We love them so much. And I'm going to turn it over to Team Mysterious Galaxy.
Woohoo! Well, I want to thank you so very much. Woohoo seemed appropriate. I don't know.
Yeah. I'm here for it.
We all need a woohoo right now. So
right? I mean, it's a Wednesday, hump day, woohoo to help get you over it. Why not? But thank you so much, Jenny. You are a phenomenal moderator. And thank you so much just to everyone, all of our authors, for joining us and sharing your new books, as well as everyone in the comments for all of your love and everything. This was such a pleasure to get to listen to all of you speak. So it really was. It really was a joy. So just thank you from Mysterious Galaxy to all of you. And everyone, don't forget that as we did the pointing thing down below, if you want a book plate, the books will be available. And otherwise, we will see you all in our next event, and have a lovely evening, everyone. Goodbye.
Thank you.